Elysian Dream, the clandestine neurotoxin of the regime, promised a painless end. It was said to immerse its recipient in the most profound desire of their life, a final, perfect dream from which they would never wake. Kalen stared at the sterile, minimalist vial, his pupils constricting. His advisor's voice was a low murmur, insisting that the chancellor-elect must be decisive. Any further delay, he warned, could incite unrest among the ranks. After a long silence, Kalen's voice, a dry rasp, questioned if it was truly without suffering. He was assured that every subject of Elysian Dream had been found with a look of serene contentment. Kalen fell silent again, the only sign of his turmoil the faint tremor in the hand hidden within the deep pocket of his bespoke suit. An eternity passed, or perhaps only a moment. He heard his own command, the tone so foreign and detached it felt as though another man had spoken. He ordered the drug administered. The high-security detention cell was a stark cube of concrete and reinforced glass, bathed in the cold, unblinking glare of fluorescent lights. Kalen walked slowly down the corridor, questioning the compulsion that drove him here. He had won. The entire nation awaited his ascension. People like this, inconvenient, weakening, a threat to his authority, were meant to be left behind. This was the necessary path of a true leader. A guard, trembling almost imperceptibly, keyed in the code to unlock the cell door, his face pale with the knowledge that he was a minor actor in a pivotal scene of history. Kalen stepped inside. Julian was curled on the floor in a corner, his hair matted and unkempt. The standard-issue gray jumpsuit he wore was torn, revealing expanses of skin that had once been cared for with meticulous precision. That skin, formerly smooth and pale, was now a canvas of deep purple and blue contusions. A thin, dark line of dried blood snaked down from a cut deep on his calf. Kalen felt a jolt of something akin to shock. He reached out, then retracted his hand, finally crouching down. His expression was a storm of unreadable emotions as he whispered the childhood name, questioning if it was still Jules. Julian's head was bowed. His eyes were unfocused, yet he was not unconscious. His eyelashes remained perfectly still. From the side, Kalen could see his lips were split and swollen. And yet, disturbingly, he was smiling. Kalen's fingers trembled. For a terrifying second, he wondered if the boy was already in his final, beautiful dream. What could he possibly be seeing? Suddenly, Julian's eyes lifted, and for a fleeting instant, the gaze was the same as it had been when they were young. Kalen remembered the brash, vibrant air he had once known. Memories of their shared youth, days spent in mutual confidence and rivalry, rushed back with dizzying clarity. Kalen's lips trembled as he spoke his full name, a low, questioning sound. Julian's smile remained as he looked at him. His face was smudged with grime, but he seemed unaware, his voice a horrifyingly hoarse whisper as he uttered Kalen's name. A tremor started deep within Kalen, but he forced himself to remain composed. He moved forward, ignoring the filth on Julian's jumpsuit, and supported him. It had always been the younger Julian who had initiated any physical contact, leaning on him with easy familiarity. Kalen had never once initiated an embrace. He was dying. This boy, who had witnessed his entire journey from an overlooked, powerless scion of a lesser house to the most powerful man in the nation, was about to die. On the very eve of his triumph, a sudden, obsessive need seized Kalen. He had to know what Julian was dreaming of. What vision could grant him such a beatific smile? He wondered if, perhaps, it was a dream of being with him. A dream of their old promise. One a great leader, the other a legendary advisor. A partnership for the ages. Kalen found himself desperate to know what he was seeing. He asked what beautiful dream he was having. Julian gave another soft, rattling laugh. He revealed that Elysian dream was a lie. The famed secret of the regime, he explained, was nothing more than a paralytic that froze the facial muscles into a rictus grin. The experience was, in fact, agonizing, a sensation of being consumed by an internal fire. The body was rendered immobile, trapped in a hell of its own making as it was slowly incinerated from within, waiting to be reduced to ash. He looked at Kalen, his gaze now clear, calm, and filled with a mocking pity. It was the same look he used to get after a successful prank in their youth. Kalen looked down, his entire body shaking like a leaf in an autumn wind. He offered to call for a doctor. Julian's gaze was rapidly losing focus. He spoke with immense effort, his smile never wavering, though he no longer had the strength. To Kalen, his voice was now a faint murmur. But he confessed, truly having a beautiful dream. A dream of being reborn. And in that new life, he would not choose Kalen. It was, he sighed, a truly beautiful dream. His eyes remained wide open as if fixed on that inner vision. With that eerie smile still etched on his face, amidst all the dirt and blood, he stopped breathing. Kalen held him, shaking uncontrollably. He knew, with chilling certainty, that he would never know a peaceful night's sleep for the rest of his life. Julian blinked his eyes open, his body burning with an intense heat, as if he were still trapped in that all-consuming fire. He tried to push away the heavy duvet, but a hand pressed him back down. A woman's voice noted that the boy still had a fever and told someone to send them away. Another voice reported that old Landon was being stubborn. He had insisted that since the general had looked after them for half their lives, he had to pay his respects to the boy before leaving. The speaker reasoned that the general and the ambassador had always shown the old veterans great respect, and it would reflect poorly on the estate to deny them this small courtesy now, fearing they might spread unsavory rumors. The woman's voice, sharp with impatience, cut in. She told them to let the men pay their respects in the courtyard and then send them on their way quickly. She complained that they were a constant drain on resources, never satisfied no matter how much they were given. A short while later, footsteps crunched on the snow in the courtyard. Julian, drifting back to consciousness, heard a powerful voice call out to him. They were heading back to their hometowns today, the man announced. They had come to say goodbye and wish him a life of peace and good health, protected from all harm. The woman beside his bed spoke again, telling him it was done, the respects had been paid, and they would be gone now. Suddenly, full awareness crashed over Julian. He shot upright. "Landon!" he cried out. The woman beside him quickly tried to soothe him, pressing him back down. She assured him it was all right, that he should rest, and that she would send the men away immediately. Julian, his forehead beaded with sweat, turned to look at her, a moment of confusion on his face. He asked if she was his Aunt Carolyn. He had to see Landon. He struggled out of bed and rushed toward the door, causing a flurry of activity as maids and staff called out in alarm, protesting that the young master was still feverish and shouldn't be out of bed. But Julian only shouted Landon's name again. From outside, the man's voice replied, full of surprised delight, calling him by his first name. Aunt Carolyn, seeing she couldn't stop him, sighed in resignation. She remarked on the boy's kind heart and ordered someone to quickly bring an umbrella and a heavy wool coat, so he could say a proper farewell. Wrapped in the thick coat, Julian stepped over the threshold. The courtyard was filled with a crowd of men, all kneeling in the snow. When they saw him, their eyes reddened. They urged him to go back inside. worried that the falling snow and cold air would worsen his illness. They were all going home, they said, and he needed to take good care of himself now. Julian's legs felt weak, but he rushed forward to grab old Landon's arm, pleading with him not to go. He begged all of them to stay. He reminded them that his mother had said this estate would always be their home. His dark eyes were filled with tears, his small, pale face framed by the fur-lined hood of his coat, his cheeks flushed with fever. Landon's heart ached, and he hurried to support his young master. He told the boy he was being too kind, that the general had been generous to them for years. Now that she and the ambassador were gone, there was nothing more the old soldiers could do for him. It was wrong to stay and waste the estate's resources on food and medicine. Besides, he explained, they were old and longed for home. The estate had provided them with a generous travel stipend. He assured Julian not to worry. Julian clung to Landon's hand, his voice firm. He repeated his mother's words, that they had served their country with honor, and many were now infirm and unable to farm. With no family to support them, the estate was to provide for them as long as they lived. He implored Landon to stay, reminding him that he had promised to teach him marksmanship. At the mention of the general's promise, tears streamed down Landon's weathered face. He lamented that the boy was just like his mother, with such a soft heart that he would surely be taken advantage of in the future. He cried out, questioning why the general had left them so soon, wondering how the boy would manage without her protection. His words moved the other veterans, and soon they were all wiping their eyes. Carolyn, holding the umbrella, looked uncomfortable. She cleared her throat softly. She chided Landon for being confused in his old age, reminding him that the young lord had the chancellor to look after him. The chancellor himself had promised as much after the general's passing, vowing that no one would be allowed to harm the boy. She questioned whether Landon's words implied the chancellor couldn't protect him, or perhaps that she herself was not a capable guardian. She pointed out that it was their own request to return home, and she had provided them with travel expenses and severance pay according to policy. She asserted that the estate had not mistreated them. Landon's lips trembled. He released Julian's hand, stepped back, and knelt again, bowing his head low to the snowy ground. He stated that he would not dare, that Miss Carolyn had spoken too harshly. He clarified that they had asked to leave because they did not want to be a burden on the young lord. The estate had treated them with the utmost honor, and they would never forget the kindness of the general and the ambassador. A look of satisfaction crossed Carolyn's face. She put a hand on Julian's arm. She told Jules that it was natural for old men to long for home, a concept of roots and belonging deeply ingrained in their culture. By providing them with a generous sum, she explained, they were honoring his parents' legacy by allowing the men to return to their homes with dignity. Julian stood silently for a moment, then walked forward until he stood before Landon. "Landon Yarrow," he said. The old man flinched, instinctively responding, "Present." Julian continued. He recounted how Landon had served under his mother in 18 major campaigns, a renowned marksman even after losing an eye. He recalled a specific battle in the Caspian campaign, for years prior, where Landon's single shot had taken down an enemy commander, turning the tide and securing a victory against overwhelming odds. He noted that because of Landon's non-commissioned status, the official commendation had gone to his mother, a fact she deeply regretted. She had rewarded him handsomely and petitioned to have his service record elevated, granting him full citizen status. Tears streamed down Landon's face. He affirmed that it was true, a debt to the general he could never repay. Julian moved to the next man, a gaunt figure. "Frank Corso," he said. He spoke of Frank's mixed heritage, his escape from persecution to join his mother's forces, his 7 tours deep into enemy territory, and his encyclopedic knowledge of the terrain and weather patterns that had saved countless lives. Frank Corso bowed his head deeply. He acknowledged that everything he had, including his name, was a gift from the general, and he wished he could have given his life for hers. Julian walked to the next man, Robert Payne. He recalled Robert's legendary strength, how in the battle for Concord City, he had single-handedly broken an enemy charge, demoralizing them. An injury to his knee in a later skirmish had left him unable to stand for long periods. Robert pressed his forehead to the snow-covered ground. He declared that the general had spent a fortune on treatments for his leg, allowing him to walk today. Now that he was old and consumed a great deal of food, he begged the young lord to let him go home and no longer be a burden. Julian ignored the plea, continuing down the line. He knew every single one of the kneeling veterans, calling each by name. With every name, the man would weep, looking as if he would rather die than leave. After he had addressed each one, Julian turned and spoke in a clear, level voice. His mother, he told them, had remembered everything they had sacrificed on the battlefield. Before she died, she had made him promise to care for them, to provide for them until the end of their days. He then asked if their decision to abandon him today was meant to make him a dishonest and ungrateful son. The men were speechless. Julian turned back to them, his eyes brimming with tears. He asked if his uncles were no longer willing to look after their jewels. The old soldiers bowed their heads and wept. They would not leave, they cried. They would stay at the estate. Carolyn's face was a mixture of pale and red. She stepped forward, holding the umbrella over Julian, and spoke softly. She suggested that the boy's fever was making him confused and that he should go back inside to rest. She mentioned that the accounting office had already disbursed several $1,000s for their travel and that vehicles had been arranged. Their luggage was already loaded. Julian turned to look at her, his voice cool. He informed his Aunt Carolyn that since his father's passing, he had inherited the title. Both the eastern estate and the western residence were his property. He would decide who stayed. As the sole master of the house, he questioned when they had ever been short of funds. He asked if the estate could not afford one small wing for loyal veterans. Carolyn was taken aback, staring at the young boy's face, which was now set like stone. His dark eyes met hers with a glint of steel that sent a chill down her spine. She was rendered speechless. Julian turned and gave a sharp command, asking where the staff assigned to the Valor Wing were. He ordered them to escort the men back to their quarters and unload their luggage. He stated that the severance and travel funds were not to be reclaimed. They were to be used to buy whiskey to warm the men against the cold. He announced that he was unwell today but would visit them tomorrow when he was better. He issued a final, chilling, if a single man was missing, he would not question anyone. He would simply have the entire staff of the Valor Wing flogged with 50 lashes each before any discussion took place. His voice still held the clear, high pitch of youth, but his words carried a tone of absolute authority. For a moment, everyone saw a reflection of the formidable general. The staff bowed their heads in unison, murmuring their assent. The old veterans bowed once more, then shakily helped each other to their feet, walking away while whispering among themselves. They remarked how he was exactly like the general, a true and honorable leader, as they wiped their red-rimmed eyes. Julian did not spare a glance for Carolyn's flushed face. He turned and went back inside. The illness was real. In that short time outdoors, his head had grown heavier, his sinuses were blocked, and his heart pounded erratically as waves of darkness washed over his vision. He stumbled back to his room and collapsed onto the bed, quickly falling back into a feverish sleep. In the Chancellor's primary study, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne. Chancellor Alastair Thorne sat behind a massive mahogany desk, signing documents with a fluid, decisive hand, seemingly unaffected by the report being delivered by his chief of staff. The man standing before him was Duncan, his most trusted aide. He was meticulously recounting the events at the young Lord Vance's estate, detailing how the gravely ill boy had stood in the snow to persuade the veterans of the Valor Wing to stay. He repeated every word Julian had spoken that day. Alastair placed a signed bill back on his desk and allowed a small smile to touch his lips. He questioned if the boy had truly recognized every single one of the old soldiers. Duncan affirmed that he had. According to the report, the boy's face was flushed with fever and he could barely stand. Yet he identified each man. The veterans were deeply moved, some reportedly weeping for hours afterward, saying that the general's legacy was secure and that the young lord, like her, valued honor and loyalty above all else. Alastair treated it as a mildly amusing anecdote, making no further comment on the matter. He instructed Duncan to summon several cabinet members for a meeting. Duncan hurried out to do so, assuming the topic was closed. Later that evening, in a quiet moment, Alastair seemed to recall something. He mused aloud, asking why, if Jules was ill, the estate administrator had not yet submitted a report. Duncan quickly dispatched a messenger to summon the man. Before long, Administrator Thompson arrived in a state of near panic, bowing so low his head nearly touched the floor. He explained that since the general's passing, the boy's aunt, a Miss Carolyn, had suggested consolidating the two large estates to reduce costs and improve manageability. The young lord had been moved to the western residence, and redundant staff from the eastern estate, along with those not in the boy's immediate service, had been dismissed. Consequently, he, stationed at the eastern estate, had been unaware of the young lord's illness. He begged the Chancellor's forgiveness. Alastair was toying with a fountain pen, examining its nib under the light. He listened without any apparent concern and asked who this Miss Carolyn was. Thompson, holding his breath, explained that she was a distant cousin of the late Ambassador Vance. Her family had fallen on hard times and sought refuge at the estate. Since the general was often away on campaigns, the ambassador had asked Miss Carolyn to look after the boy. After the ambassador and the general both passed, Miss Carolyn, seeing the boy was still young and having missed her own chances at marriage, had stayed on to manage the household and oversee his daily life. Alastair smiled faintly. He quoted Julian's words from that morning, mimicking a youthful, declarative tone. He remarked that the boy, at 14, seemed to understand that he was the sole master of both properties. He then addressed Thompson directly, pointing out that he, a government official appointed by the Chancellor himself, seemed confused about who his true master was. Alastair concluded that Thompson's judgment was poor and that his career was over. A cold sweat broke out on Thompson's back. He continued to bow his head, not daring to utter a word of defense. He knew the Chancellor had no patience for excuses. Accepting punishment silently might lead to a simple dismissal. Arguing would only compound the offense. Alastair set down the pen. He ordered the man dismissed from his post. He instructed that a directive be sent to the Civil Service Commission. This man was never to be re-employed in a government position. He then told them to find a more competent administrator for the estate. Never to be re-employed. The words were a death sentence for a career. Thompson felt his body go limp, but he knew the Chancellor's word was final. He accepted his fate with silent tears as the Chancellor's security detail escorted him out, stripping him of his credentials and ejecting him from the government complex. Alistair rose and adjusted his suit jacket. He told Duncan to have his car brought around. He was going out incognito to see young Jules. Duncan was taken aback. He reminded the Chancellor that it was the day for his routine medical checkup. The chief medical officers were already waiting. Alistair waved a dismissive hand. He told Duncan to send them home. He was already halfway out of the room. Duncan swallowed his objections and hurried to follow. At the Vance estate, Julian was lost in a deep, fitful sleep. He felt a cool cloth on his forehead, a soothing sensation against the fire raging through his body. The silk duvet felt immensely heavy, pressing down on his chest and making it difficult to breathe. His throat was parched. He tried to push the covers away, but a cool hand gently caught his wrist. His eyelids felt glued shut. He struggled weakly but couldn't break the grip. The hand placed his own back under the covers and tucked them in securely. He managed to rasp out a single word for water. The hand on his forehead withdrew. A moment later, he felt a strong pair of arms lift him, cradling him against a firm, broad chest. A cup was pressed to his lips. He was urged to drink. He swallowed too quickly, and water trickled down his chin. The same cool hand wiped it away, fingers brushing gently against his lips. Weak and disoriented, he instinctively nestled closer into the embrace, like a young animal seeking comfort. A low chuckle rumbled from the chest he was leaning against. A voice, amused, told him to stop nuzzling, that he would ruin the man's suit. That voice, that word, suit. He forced his eyes open. The face that came into focus was indeed that of Chancellor Alistair Thorne. Clarity struck him like a physical blow. He immediately tried to pull away, fumbling to sit up and straighten his pajamas. Alistair chuckled again, pressing him gently back down. He told the boy not to get up, remarking on how pitiful he looked in his illness. He mused that it had only been a few months since they last saw each other, yet Julian had become so distant. Julian looked at Alistair's face, a pang of sorrow striking his heart. He said in a low voice that he was fine and questioned why the Chancellor had come. Alistair replied that he was clearly not fine. He added that the estate administrator had failed to report his illness, and that he had already dismissed the man. He promised to find a better replacement. His tone was casual, but it carried an undercurrent of cold fury. He had initially been merely displeased upon hearing that the veterans were being dismissed. He had thought that Julian, now 14 and the head of the house, was old enough to make his own decisions, even if they were poor ones. It was a sad thought that his old friend's son was growing up badly, but Alistair was not a sentimental man and was prepared to let it be. But then he learned the truth, that it was a subordinate acting presumptuously while the true master of the house lay sick. Julian felt his eyes sting. His previous formality vanished. Drawing on the memory of being a small child who had once played on Alistair's lap, he took a risk. He grabbed the sleeve of Alistair's expensive suit and leaned against him like a child. He murmured that, with his mother gone, it was perhaps inappropriate to retain an administrator of that rank anyway. He knew his uncle Alistair cared for him, but he didn't want to overstep his bounds. Alistair was caught off guard by this sudden return to intimacy. He saw the boy leaning against him, face flushed with fever, speaking not with his usual stubbornness but with a newfound vulnerability. A suspicion formed in his mind. Perhaps with his formidable mother gone, others were slighting the boy, and he was finally feeling the sting of it. Despite his internal calculations, he instinctively supported Julian's frail body. He was struck by how light he was, a mere collection of bones. A flicker of anger rose in him. He commented on how thin Julian was, accusing him of not eating properly again, of avoiding his meals just as he had as a child. Julian closed his eyes and mumbled that he was still in mourning. Alistair had forgotten. He gently stroked the boy's hair, which was damp with sweat. He took a fresh handkerchief from his pocket and began to dry it. He remarked that adherence to tradition had its limits. No one expected a growing boy to abstain from proper nutrition for 3 years. His mother would have been heartbroken to see him like this. Julian didn't answer. His mind was racing. This was strange. In his first and second lives, he had also fallen ill around this time, a simple case of flu that had resolved itself in a few days. It had never warranted a personal visit from the Chancellor. What was different now? He glanced at Alistair's relaxed expression. It was likely just the flu again. What had changed the sequence of events? It had to be the veterans. In his previous lives, he had been too sick to intervene. He had woken up to find they had all voluntarily left the estate. While he had felt a sense of loss, he hadn't thought much of it. This time he had kept them. Was that the reason? Did Alistair care so much about those old soldiers? No, that wasn't it. He didn't care about the men themselves. He cared that his mother's final wishes were being honored. A wave of complex emotion, both bitter and sweet, washed over him. He tightened his grip on Alistair's sleeve. Kaelin's bitter words from his past life echoed in his memory. The Chancellor dotes only on you. He favors you above all others because of your mother. He disregarded all convention, all morality, to be with his nominal sister. He even planned to leave his entire legacy to their illegitimate child, tarnishing his own historical record. What will the history books say? That man, his face once clear and intelligent, had been twisted by jealousy and resentment. All his years of loyal service, all the genuine camaraderie, had been reinterpreted as calculated ambition. A lifelong companion had become a mortal enemy. Julian smiled faintly in the darkness of his memory. What did he care for conventions and morality now? He had died twice. Alistair and his mother were monumental figures who had reshaped the nation. The Chancellor, even as a young man, had been a brilliant military strategist, earning victory after victory. As a leader, he was diligent and effective, a figure who would be remembered as one of the greats, despite his untimely death from old battlefield injuries. His mother, who had risen from humble beginnings to become a celebrated general, was a symbol of integrity, courage, and compassion. Her state funeral had been an event of national mourning. If two such people had loved each other, who were the small-minded to judge? As for the rumor of an illegitimate child, it was unproven. It was true that the Chancellor had always shown him particular favor, but Julian had always assumed it was the affection of an uncle for his late friend's son. Alistair was naturally a cold and distant man, so it was hard to gauge the depth of his feelings, except for the one instance where he had indulged Julian's most outrageous request. Julian had always been unconventional, with a certain disdain for rigid rules. His own father, Ambassador Vance, had always been distant and cool. The genuine warmth Alistair was showing him now felt more real than any paternal affection he had ever known. Thinking this, his feelings of attachment to Alistair deepened, and he simply rested in his embrace. Alistair hadn't expected the boy to be so clingy when ill. He had only intended a brief visit. Now he found himself staying. After wiping away the sweat, he had a servant bring medicine, personally ensuring Julian drank it before watching him fall back asleep. Only then did he return to the capital. The next day, Alistair was presented with a bowl of perfect winter pears. He found them exceptionally crisp and juicy and summoned Duncan. He remarked that the pears were excellent and instructed him to have a crate sent to the Vance estate for Jules. Duncan acknowledged the order. Alistair added with a faint smile that the boy was much more agreeable when he was sick. He recalled how distant Julian had been lately, and how he had heard rumors of his temperamental and willful behavior. It seemed, he concluded, that he was still just a child in need of coddling. Duncan, thinking of the recent incident where the young lord had smashed the window of a senator's car with a riding crop, wisely kept his thoughts to himself. He noted that the Chancellor had gone from using Julian's formal name to the affectionate Jules after just one visit, and that a rare smile had appeared on his face. Clearly, the young lord's sickbed appeals had been effective. Duncan smoothly agreed, adding that it was no surprise, as everyone said he was just like the general, possessing the same first-class spirit. Alistair waved a dismissive hand. He stated it was good that he was like his mother. If he took after Ambassador Vance, he'd be a spineless academic. Duncan did not dare reply. The late ambassador had been a scholar, a man of letters who had won his position through academic brilliance before marrying the general. He was a man of refined words and careful actions. The Chancellor and the general, on the other hand, were forged in the crucible of war. It was no surprise they looked down on cautious intellectuals. Duncan hurried off to arrange for the pairs to be sent, thinking to himself that after the general's death, there had been a motion to downgrade the estate's official status and remove its special administrative staff. The Chancellor, however, had never approved the motion. It seemed the special privileges of the estate were not going to be revoked anytime soon. That day, Julian finally broke his fever. He felt much better, though his mouth was dry. The crate of pears arrived, and he found them delicious and refreshing, a rare treat in the dead of winter. He kept a few for himself and had the rest taken to the Valor Wing for the veterans to enjoy. His Aunt Carolyn came to him upon hearing this. She chided him gently, asking why he had suddenly become so concerned with the Valor Wing. She pointed out that the pears were a precious gift from the Chancellor himself and would have been impressive to serve to guests once his mourning period was over. It would have shown everyone, especially the gossips, that the family's favor with the Chancellor was still strong. Julian replied lazily that it was she who had been ready to send the men away before the winter was even over. He knew they were deeply hurt, even if they hadn't said so, and that they needed to be reassured. It was precisely because the gift was so valuable that it would mean so much to them. Carolyn was momentarily speechless, then forced a smile. She asked if the boy was blaming her for being irresponsible. Julian smiled back. "Not at all," he said. He knew his aunt was just trying to be frugal, which brought him to another matter. With his mother gone, the estate's official designation should probably be retired. While the Chancellor would not reclaim the property, it was too large and difficult to manage. He proposed they consolidate the two residences. He had grown up in the Eastern Estate and felt that living in the Western residence since his mourning began had brought him ill luck, even sickness. He suggested it was a matter of bad feng shui. He intended to move back to the Eastern Estate as soon as his mourning period ended and asked her to have the staff begin preparations. Carolyn was stunned. She remembered that her own quarters were here, in the Western residence. If everyone moved to the east, before she could argue, a servant announced a visitor. A young Mr. Leo from the Duke's family had arrived to see him. With a guest present, Carolyn had to hold her tongue. Julian, relieved to avoid a debate, told the servant to show him in. He then tasked his aunt with arranging for some refreshments for their guest. Just as he spoke, the curtain at the doorway was pushed aside, and Leo strode in with a familiar grin. He told Aunt Carolyn not to treat him as a guest, that he was just there to check on Jules. He said he had heard a rumor that Jules was sick. Without ceremony, he shed his heavy snow-dusted overcoat, revealing a deep red cashmere sweater embroidered with camellias. He walked straight to Julian and pressed a hand to his forehead. He asked how sick Julian was, if he still had a fever, and told him not to get up. He apologized for not changing his clothes, explaining that he had just escaped his mother's clutches by pretending to visit his uncle. He had slipped away to see Julian and hoped he didn't mind that he was still in his formal attire. Julian told him he was being reckless, visiting a house in mourning during the holidays. It was not only bad luck, but he might also catch his illness and get an earful from his mother. Leo laughed it off. He complained about being dragged to endless parties and said he was exhausted. Julian recalled hearing that Leo had recently been given his formal adult name. Leo confirmed it. Over the holidays, his grandfather, the Duke, had suddenly noticed him and realized how old he'd gotten. He'd bestowed upon him the formal name Anton. His father was thrilled, but his mother had privately grumbled that the name was uninspired. This led to an argument, with his father insisting the name signified a pure and honest heart, a compliment to Leo's sincere and straightforward nature. Julian smiled. He found it fitting and said he would call him Anton from now on. Leo waved it off. He noted that Julian's face was still flushed and asked if he was still feverish, reaching to check if his back was sweaty. Julian shifted away, pushing him gently. He told him to just sit still, lest he catch something and have to face his mother's lectures. Leo was unconcerned. He lamented that since Julian had been in mourning, they had grown distant. He then sniffed the air, asking what scent Julian was using. He found it pleasant, like grapefruit mixed with bergamot, and asked for some to give to his father. Julian was momentarily confused, then remembered. He reached under his pillow and pulled out a small scented sachet. He explained that the Chancellor had visited the other day and, finding the room stuffy, had left his personal sachet by his pillow. Leo was astonished to hear that the Chancellor himself had come to visit. Julian confirmed it, guessing it was because the Chancellor had some free time during the holiday recess. Leo was envious. He remarked that his family's standing with the Chancellor was clearly as strong as ever. He had heard that the Chancellor was a master of perfumery but rarely indulged in it for fear of being criticized by the Ethics Committee. He only ever made 1 or 2 cents for his own use, which the political elite considered the height of sophistication and eagerly tried to replicate. Julian agreed that no one could ever quite match the Chancellor's blends. Leo nodded, then rummaged in his inner pocket, producing several polished stones. He said he had been saving them, picking up any that caught his eye. He showed off a piece of tourmaline, with its watermelon red core and green rind. Next was a bloodstone, its color vibrant. He boasted that he'd intercepted it from his father. Last was an agate with an icy exterior and a swirl of colors inside. He'd had a craftsman grind a set of marbles from it and asked if they could play. Julian had few hobbies, but he loved collecting stones. All kinds, from simple pebbles to precious gems and jade, as long as they were beautiful. He kept them in crystal bowls and would often handle them. Leo, his friend since childhood, knew this well and always kept an eye out for new additions for his collection. Julian examined the stones in his hand. He picked up a honey-colored, translucent marble that contained a perfectly preserved bee. He found it fascinating, identifying it as amber. He noted it even had a water bubble inside, and remarked that it must have been expensive, questioning if Leo's allowance could cover it. Leo, thinking Julian liked it, became animated. He said he was glad he liked it. He mentioned that after the holiday, the sons and heirs of the regional governors would be arriving at the academy. He would be attending as a study partner and would finally be able to hang out with Julian more often. He added that having more students around would mean the tutors wouldn't focus all their attention on Julian. Julian's fingers, which had been stroking the amber marble, paused. He remarked that they were all from powerful families, used to being treated like royalty in their own territories, and would surely be arrogant. He wondered what fun could be had with them. Leo sighed. He said he was worried too. His father had told him that the chancellor was likely looking to adopt an heir from among the relatives. The dynastic council had advised him to choose a young child, but the chancellor had refused, saying the thought of raising a child exhausted him. He preferred to select a promising, nearly grown candidate and mentor him for a few years. Now, all the regional governors were eager to put their sons forward. His father had warned him to be on his best behavior and not to drag Julian into any trouble. He recalled his father's lecture. Lord Vance had an inherited title and could get away with anything, as the chancellor would always forgive him for the late general's sake. But Leo was different. He was there to build a future, not to fool around. He slumped, his face a mask of gloom. Julian glanced at him but said nothing. After a moment, he spoke. He said that if Leo really wanted to avoid the duty of being a study partner, it wasn't that difficult. Leo asked how. Julian replied coolly that his family just needed to arrange a marriage for him. Marriage was a major life event, and the government wouldn't be so unreasonable as to force a man to abandon his duties for a courtly role. Leo yelped. He'd rather be a study partner. The thought of having a wife to answer to as well was terrifying. He accused Julian of trying to ruin his life. Julian smiled faintly and placed the amber marble back in Leo's hand, his interest gone. Leo assumed he was just tired from his illness. He helped him back into bed. He told him to rest and get well soon, then said he had to go. But he lingered, looking reluctant to leave. He reminded Julian to take good care of his little pomegranate, saying he was too busy today to visit him. Julian was momentarily confused. Pomegranate? Leo pushed the entire pouch of gems into Julian's hands. He said he had just asked the stable master. Despite the cold, they were making sure the colt got a run every day to keep him from getting fat. He didn't have time to see him today. He told Julian to rest well. He adjusted his clothes, tucked the covers around Julian one last time, and then hurried out, presumably to get back to his family before his absence was noted. Only then did Julian remember. Pomegranate was the name Leo had given to the purebred Arabian colt Julian had raised for him. A shipment of Arabians had arrived as a diplomatic gift, and one of the maras had foaled. Knowing Leo's love for horses, Julian had requested the foal from the national stables. Given the general's long military service, the request was immediately granted. However, raising such a horse was incredibly expensive, and Leo's family, still under the Duke's patriarchal rule, lived on a strict allowance. He couldn't possibly afford to keep the horse at his own home. So, the colt remained at the Vance estate, where Leo visited constantly, doting on it. In his first life, after Leo's father inherited the dukedom, Leo had become the official heir and finally took Pomegranate as his personal mount, cherishing the horse for years. You're just too good to me. So good I don't know how to refuse you or how to repay you. Leo's exhausted, helpless words from that first life echoed in his mind. The phantom pain, like a shard of ice in his heart, returned. Julian touched the pouch of gems, a mix of emotions churning inside him. After the second life, his hatred for Leo had faded significantly. He remembered how, in the beginning of that second life, he had been reborn and Leo had come to visit. He had thrown him out without a word, severing their friendship on the spot. He wondered now if, on that day too, the boy had come with a pocketful of gems purchased with his meager allowance. What a fool. They were all real, of course. No one would dare swindle the Duke's son, but he had surely been overcharged, paying far more than their resale value. A fool, just as everyone said. He couldn't recall now what had happened to Pomegranate after he and Leo had their falling out. Perhaps Aunt Carolyn had sold him. After all, a purebred Arabian was worth a fortune. He never saw the horse again in his second life. The entire capital knew that Lord Vance despised Leo. If any party invited Leo, Lord Vance would walk out. As Julian's influence grew, first as Kaelin's right-hand man and then as advisor to the Chancellor-elect, no one dared to invite the Duke's youngest son anymore. In a city full of powerful people, he was easily forgotten. Leo had tried repeatedly to reconcile, sending messengers and mutual friends with apologies. He never understood what he had done to deserve such a final and absolute rejection from his childhood friend. The Duke's family was also baffled but, to avoid further trouble, had secured a minor military post for their youngest son and sent him to a remote outpost. Later, when Julian was thrown into that high-security cell, Leo had desperately tried to get permission to visit him. Powerless, he had only managed to have some of Julian's favorite food sent in. He had also sent a message. He was still trying everything he could to get him released and told him not to worry, to eat well and wait. But there was no release. There was only Kaelin and the Elysian dream. If he had known then what he knew now. Julian touched his forehead, which felt feverish again. He lay back down, placing the gems and the scented sachet together on his nightstand. He decided not to dwell on the past. The question now was what he should do. A man who had wasted 2 entire lifetimes on petty emotions and personal attachments. He was disgusted with himself. First life, second life, it was all meaningless now. If he failed to live this third life well, he would be the biggest fool of all. After several more days of solid rest, his body finally recovered, and Julian could no longer stand being confined to his bed. He got up and wandered through the estate alone, making his way toward the Valor Wing. Before he even reached the courtyard, he heard the sound of loud laughter from the small training field outside. He saw old Robert trying to catch a fiery red colt that was bucking and tearing around the field, its hooves kicking up flurries of snow. Robert was chasing after it, and Julian guessed the colt had slipped its lead. Landon was the first to spot him. He immediately stood up and called out that the young lord had arrived. All the veterans got to their feet, asking with concern if he was feeling better. They noted that his color looked good but worried he might catch a chill. Julian just smiled. He said he was well and was just checking on his old friends, asking what they were doing. Landon explained that they were watching Robert exercise the horse. He was ridiculously fond of the little colt. The other day, when they were about to leave, Robert had spent the whole night hugging the animal and crying, feeding it a whole bag of oats because he felt guilty. As a result, the colt had gained quite a bit of weight in just a few days, which wouldn't do. Robert finally managed to catch the red colt. He patted its ears affectionately, treating it like his own son. After securing it to a post, he walked over, grinning. He accused Landon of telling tales in front of the young lord, joking that Julian might cut his horse's feed rations. Frank Corso nudged Robert in the back. Robert turned, confused, and asked why he did that. He insisted that he had always been just as blunt with the general. He turned to Julian and declared that he hadn't wanted to leave because of the colt. A horse like this needed the best feed. He ran a hand along Pomegranate's sleek, shiny coat. In the cold weather, he explained they needed even better nutrition. But the accounting office had cut the stable's budget in half, claiming it was too expensive. The grain they provided wasn't even the right kind. He had been so angry he started buying proper feed, yellow soybeans and millet, out of his own allowance. He urged Julian to look at how beautiful the colt was. This was how a horse should be raised to build strength. Frank told Robert he was being foolish. He pointed out that the young lord had just inherited his title and was still in mourning. Did he really think he would concern himself with something as trivial as horse feed? Julian smiled. He told Robert he was right. He would speak with the accounting office and allocate a separate budget for him. The horse feed would be his to procure as he saw fit, with no interference. Robert was finally satisfied. He said that was more like it. He knew the young lord was no fool. Even the general knew that raising horses was expensive. He had been in charge of the stables for over a decade and had never skimmed a single penny. If they didn't trust him to care for the horses, they shouldn't have given him the job. But if he was in charge, the horses would be well fed. Satisfied, the gruff old soldier led the red colt away. Landon apologized to Julian, explaining that Robert had spent his whole life with horses and was a bit simple-minded. He asked Julian not to take offense. Julian laughed. "Of course not," he said. He preferred people who were straightforward. He found convoluted speech exhausting. Besides, the horse was his responsibility, and it shouldn't go hungry. He turned his gaze to the targets on the training field. He told Landon that he had come today to learn how to shoot. Landon was taken aback. The young lord wanted to learn marksmanship? He couldn't help but laugh. He guessed that the boy thought his old title of Master Marksman sounded impressive, but he warned him that he had no idea of the hardship involved. It had been years of relentless training to build arm strength, drawing a bow 300 times a day, every day without fail. He told the boy that he was born to a life of privilege, the heir to a great house. There was no need for him to endure such suffering. Julian listened and smiled. He admitted it sounded difficult, but he wanted to try. He joked that if he got good enough, perhaps he could win a few bets at the academy. He asked where they should start. He wondered if it was like in the books, where one trained their eyes by staring at a flea hanging in a window. Landon chuckled. He thought the boy was just curious and decided to humor him. He said he had never tried that method, guessing it was too slow. A sharp eye was important, he explained, but some men could hit a target blindfolded. The real key was control of the arm and the trigger. If you could aim and hit exactly where you intended every single time, you could hit a target by sound alone. Warming to his subject, he brought over a small caliber rifle. He said he would first teach the boy how to hold it, how to aim, how to control his breathing. The hand had to be steady without a tremor. He laughed as Julian struggled to hold the rifle steady, explaining that it was the smallest one they had. When he was training, his instructor would place a glass of water or a coin on their elbows. If it fell, there was a penalty. After just a few minutes of holding the rifle, Julian's face turned pale, and his hands began to shake violently. Sweat broke out on his back. Landon, laughing but concerned, took the rifle from him and began to massage his arm muscles. He warned him that his arm would be sore tomorrow and suggested that he just practice when he felt like it and not push himself. He explained that training had to start with building arm strength and maintaining focus. There were tricks to training the eyes too. He advised spending more time outdoors in open spaces on bright, sunny days and avoiding staying indoors for too long. At night, he should avoid reading or writing by candlelight unless the room was brightly lit, as it would ruin his eyesight. Landon went on for a while, but Julian was still determined. He took the rifle back and tried again. Landon watched his face turn red with effort, the veins in his neck standing out. He felt a mix of pity and admiration. He told the boy that if he wanted to win bets at parties, he could just buy whatever he wanted. There was no need to suffer like this. Julian, aiming at the distant target, replied that what you buy is never as satisfying as what you win. He was determined to win just once. Landon was reminded of his own youth. He smiled. He guessed the boy wanted to beat the young man from the Duke's family. He recalled that when he and his friends were learning to shoot, it was all about competition. If you hit the wing of a bird today, I had to hit its eye tomorrow. They had terrorized all the chickens in their village. He suggested that the young lord needed a companion to train with. The estate was too quiet these days. Julian smiled slyly. He said he was thinking of buying some young boys and having the veterans of the Valor Wing train them. It would give the old men something to do and pass the time. Those who showed promise and persevered could be adopted as his own wards. He asked Landon what he thought of the idea. Landon was stunned. The boy was only 14. What was he talking about, adopting wards? He looked at Julian, his expression growing complex. In their society, it was common for powerful figures, military commanders, influential officials, to select promising youths. Take them in as household troops, train them meticulously as loyal retainers, and grant them the title of ward. With this title and a good performance, a bright future was assured, making these wards far more loyal and capable than ordinary soldiers. Once they came of age and distinguished themselves, a strategic marriage could further consolidate power. The general, being a woman, had never taken on wards. After the Unification Wars and her marriage, she had gradually disbanded her private forces and distanced herself from military affairs. The number of household guards had dwindled over the years, and the remaining few were nearing retirement. It made sense to start now buying indentured youths and training them. By the time the young lord came of age, these adopted sons would be grown and ready to serve. Was this a passing whim born of loneliness, or a calculated plan? Landon remembered the authority the boy had shown just days before, standing in the snow and commanding them all. A thought flashed through his mind, and his eyes grew moist. The boy, without his parents to protect him, was being forced to grow up. Julian turned and smiled at Landon, his eyes crimming, looking for all the world like the carefree child who had once played at his mother's knee. He said he would instruct the household managers to contact the agencies and have suitable boys sent over for selection. He would then need the veterans to help him pick out the most promising candidates. He made no effort to hide his intentions from the loyal old soldier. He was alone, with no one he could truly rely on. While his mother's memory was still fresh and her old comrades in the military would still grant him some favors. He would send the boys for training in a few years to build a network of useful people. In his past life, Kalen had used Julian's connections to place his own men in the military. The veterans, out of respect for the general and their affection for Julian, had given them opportunities to distinguish themselves. Kalen had leveraged these opportunities to win the favor of many military leaders. In the end, though Julian had opened all the doors, it was Kalen who had reaped all the rewards. Julian narrowed his eyes, focusing on the distant target. He squeezed the trigger. Crack. A hit. Landon shouted with joy. A hit. Not a miss this time. The boy had a natural talent. Julian smiled. Leo loved shooting and riding, and in his first life, Julian had spent some time on the range himself, though he had only ever been moderately skilled. In this life, he wanted mastery. Not just that. He wanted more people, more power. Strength was only real when you truly possessed it. People were only yours when they truly served you. Otherwise, he was just squandering the legacy his mother had built over decades of blood and battle, letting others benefit from her reputation while they looked down on him. 2 wasted lifetimes had taught him this one simple lesson. He was enjoying himself at the range when his Aunt Carolyn's voice cut through the air. "Oh, my dear boy," she exclaimed. "You're not even fully recovered. Why are you out here playing in this cold?" She turned to Landon. And you, Mr. Landon, a man of your age, you should know better than to encourage him. The boy is your benefactor now." Julian calmly reloaded the rifle without even looking at her. "Is there something you need, Aunt Carolyn?" he asked. Carolyn froze. Usually, when she nagged him, Julian would offer a placating smile and an excuse. Now, he hadn't even acknowledged her scolding, simply asking her business. She was momentarily at a loss for words, then remembered her purpose. The Civil Service Commission had suddenly sent a new administrator. The previous one, Mr. Thompson, had been dismissed. The new man was waiting at the Eastern Estate to be presented to the Lord. Julian finally lowered the rifle, a flicker of surprise on his face. By tradition, when a titled noble passed away, their household's special government appointments and privileges were supposed to be revoked. However, the commission rarely acted on its own initiative. It was usually up to the family to slowly scale back their staff after the mourning period. Some families never did. The old Count of Chengxin, for example, still brazenly displayed the ducal crest bestowed by the previous chancellor, and no one said a word. In his past life, Julian had petitioned to have the special appointments revoked after his mourning, and the commission had quickly approved, reassigning Thompson elsewhere. But for Thompson to be outright dismissed and a new administrator immediately appointed? What was the reason for this? He turned and asked for the new administrator's name. Carolyn faltered. The steward at the Eastern Estate had told her the name, but she hadn't paid close attention, being in a hurry to find Julian. She offered a weak smile. "I seem to have forgotten to ask." Julian ignored her. He glanced at the sky and casually asked which of the houseboys was on messenger duty. Carolyn was again taken aback. "Simon," she said. Julian nodded slightly. "Have him come here and report." A sense of unease began to stir in Carolyn. She sent a nearby maid to fetch the boy, her mind racing. The general had never bothered much with household affairs, so Julian had always been attended by maids and nannies. Although he had 4 official pages assigned to him, they couldn't accompany him into the academy, so they were mostly for show. Why was he suddenly taking an interest in them now? Of course, with the general gone, the boy's title was now prominent. Previously, the administrator and stewards handled external affairs, while she managed the household. But now, the boy would have to take a more public role. She realized she needed to place someone loyal by his side immediately, or she would be left in the dark like today. As she was calculating, she forced a smile. "I was just going to tell you, dear. I thought I would let Mr. Evans at the East Wing handle it since you're not well. That's why I didn't ask for the details. It was my oversight." Julian said nothing. Simon, a young boy with his hair still in a youth's topknot, ran in. He was bright-eyed and well-spoken. He bowed smartly. "My lord, Mr. Evans of the Eastern Estate sent me to report. The previous administrator, Mr. Thompson, has been dismissed for dereliction of duty by order of the Chancellor and will never be reemployed. The Commission has appointed a new gentleman, a Mr. Robert Sterling. Mr. Evans says he is a very capable man, skilled in practical matters. As it is his first day, he requests an audience with you if your health permits. If not, he asks that you continue to rest and Mr. Evans will handle the transition." The boy was only 11 or 12, but his report was clear and articulate. Julian nodded. He instructed him to have the new administrator wait in the drawing room and asked Mr. Evans to keep him company. He ordered the kitchen to prepare a luncheon. A simple, non-ostentatious meal would suffice, and to have a few of the household's resident scholars ready to join them. Also, have my formal morning suit and silver collar pins laid out in my room. Carolyn panicked. A luncheon? There's no time. We've been operating on a tight budget since the morning began. The kitchens don't have enough provisions on hand. The truth was, she had recently dismissed several of the chefs and replaced the head of the kitchen, tightening the household's purse strings. She knew they couldn't possibly prepare a formal meal on such short notice. What shocked her more was Thompson's dismissal. He had never interfered with her running of the household, simply transferring the estate's income to her accounts each month. Now, with a new administrator, she would have to get him on her side quickly, make him understand who really ran things. Julian cut her off impatiently. He ordered a full luncheon catered from the Gilded Spoon, a high-end restaurant known for its refined cuisine. He specified their signature chilled cucumber soup and a couple of bottles of their best Chardonnay. He then turned and walked away. Carolyn was aghast. The Gilded Spoon? A meal from there costs hundreds of dollars. And the boy is still sick. But Simon replied with a crisp, "Yes, sir. I'll see to it at once." He bowed and hurried off. Julian turned back to Landon. "I must go, Sergeant. We'll continue this another day. I have to meet my guest." Landon was beaming like a proud father. "Of course, my lord. That is official business. A chancellor-appointed administrator. What a great honor. Don't forget to send a letter of thanks to the chancellor." Julian smiled. "Don't worry, Mr. Evans will handle it." He walked toward the main house without another glance at Carolyn. Carolyn stood frozen, her face stiff. She ignored the gloating smile on Landon's face and hurried to follow Julian. In the study, the head steward, Mr. Evans, was conversing with Robert Sterling. They both rose and bowed when Julian entered. Julian nodded slightly. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Evans, please be seated." Sterling was a composed man. Despite Julian's youth, he showed no condescension. His bow was precise, and his answers were thorough and professional. Julian was pleased. Still, he was puzzled by this turn of events. The replacement of the administrator was not something that had happened in his previous lives. He asked curiously if Mr. Sterling knew why Mr. Thompson had been dismissed so suddenly. Sterling smiled faintly. "I was told it was because your lordship fell ill, and the chancellor received no report from the estate." Mr. Thompson was summoned for questioning, and his answers were found wanting. "The chancellor felt he had neglected his duties to you, and so I was appointed." Julian's eyes flickered. "By rights," he said, "with my mother gone, the special administrative status of this estate should be revoked. I imagine the ethics committee will soon be filing complaints about overstepping protocol." Sterling laughed. "The ethics committee files complaints every day. It's quite common for the great families to exceed their official allowances in dress and lifestyle. The Department of Protocol itself said last year that the regulations need to be revised. If they were strictly enforced, half the citizens on the street wearing silk ties and imported shoes would be arrested. It's impossible to police. In the end, what is and isn't a breach of protocol all comes down to the Chancellor's favor. And what the Chancellor grants can hardly be called a breach, can it? As long as your lordship benefits, why pay them any mind? He spoke with a lively, informal tone, deliberately suiting his manner to his young master. It worked. Julian smiled, and Mr. Evans beside him chuckled in agreement. "Indeed, our only duty is to be worthy of the Chancellor's grace." Sterling respectfully asked for the Lord's instructions on what matters he should attend to first. He noted that the official mourning period would soon be over, and it would be time to compile a list of social engagements to re-enter society. Julian thought for a moment. "There are still 2 months left, so there's no hurry. I'm still young, so we can let the social calendar wait." The The season's first state dinner will be around then. The chancellor will likely summon me. Then it's back to the academy. He suddenly stiffened, almost jumping out of his chair. Wait, did we send out holiday gifts to all my tutors before the break? Mr. Evans smiled. Of course, my lord. The head butler informed me that you personally selected them. Has the illness affected your memory? Julian's face was pale. That's not enough. The spring semester is about to start. We need to prepare another round of gifts. He paced the room in agitation. I haven't studied a thing. The tutors are going to kill me. He spun around. We must send more gifts, very generous ones. Then perhaps the professors at the academy will go a little easier on me. Sterling was taken aback. The poised young lord who had seemed so much older than his years was suddenly acting like a panicked schoolboy. A smile touched his eyes, though he maintained a professional demeanor. There's no need to be overly concerned, my lord. After the break, the sons of the regional governors will all be arriving in the capital to attend the academy, as per the chancellor's decree. With so many new students, the professor's attention will be divided. Julian's expression only grew more morose. That's even worse. Those heirs and scions have all been handpicked. Every one of them is a better student than I am. The comparison will make me look like a complete dunce. Especially Professor Albright. He'll have me on detention every single day. Sterling couldn't help but smile. But I had heard that the general rendered a great service to the Albright family, and that the professor holds you in high regard and has great hopes for you. Julian looked as if he'd swallowed something bitter. It's a long story. He teaches ethics. I'd better use the next few months to cram. He paused, then added, Professor Albright collects rare paper. Mr. Evans, could I trouble you to find some new and interesting stock? A few boxes for the professor. It might lighten the punishment. I can't bear the thought of being humiliated in front of all those governor's sons. Sterling suppressed a laugh. Mr. Evans chuckled. A small matter, my lord. I recently came across some excellent crimson fiber parchment. It's quite exquisite, though expensive. I fear Miss Carolyn will complain about the scholar's budget. The mention of her name seemed to remind Julian of something. That's right, Mr. Sterling, with you here, there is another matter I must entrust to you. Sterling immediately straightened, his expression serious. My lord, please instruct me. Julian explained that his late father had a distant cousin who had been living at the estate. Due to his mother's frequent military deployments, this Aunt Carolyn had helped care for him. With both his parents gone and the household in mourning, her own prospects had been overlooked. Now that he was getting older, it was no longer appropriate for an unmarried female relative to remain in the house. He therefore tasked Sterling with finding a suitable husband for her. The dowry would be provided by the estate. All other arrangements he left to Sterling's discretion. Sterling understood immediately. The late Ambassador Vance had come from a poor, orphaned background. He had only been ennobled after marrying the general. This distant cousin, having come to them for support, would not have come from a prominent family. He asked respectfully if his lordship had any specific requirements for the match. Julian replied that the man should be financially stable and of good character. He wanted the matter settled quickly after the mourning period ended, as any further delay would be a disservice on his part as a younger relative. Sterling inquired about the dowry, asking what standard he should follow. Julian instructed him to use the same precedent as when his mother's ladies-in-waiting had been married off. In addition to the personal gifts from his mother, the estate had provided them with generous dowries. Sterling glanced at Mr. Evans and understood instantly. This was not just about propriety. This so-called aunt, who clearly did not understand her place, had overstepped, and the young lord was displeased. The matter needed to be handled swiftly, but also elegantly to avoid any public criticism. He bowed and accepted the task. Julian was unconcerned. This Aunt Caroline had been dealt with in every life. In the first, Leo had arranged her departure. In the second, Kaelin had sent a clever aide to the estate who had found her a husband. Clearly, intelligent people saw the same solution. He had learned from their effective methods. He had far more important things to do than to get bogged down in household drama. Since this administrator was chosen by the Chancellor, he would surely handle such a small matter with finesse. "I'm counting on you, Mr. Sterling," he said casually. Sterling bowed respectfully. After Julian had left, he turned to Mr. Evans with a smile. "The young lord seems quite good-natured. I shall be counting on your guidance in the days to come, Mr. Evans. As for Miss Caroline, perhaps you could offer some advice? I should not like to fail in the first task my lord has given me." Evans replied deferentially, "It is I who will need your guidance, Mr. Sterling." Miss Caroline was trusted by the late ambassador and helped raise the young lord, so she has always managed the household. She has been diligent in her care for him. But his lordship is older now, and it is indeed improper for her to stay. You need only follow his lordship's instructions. I will have the relevant documents sent to you shortly. As for the young lord, he has a good heart, a youthful innocence. You will find him easy to serve, Mr. Sterling. You may set your mind at ease." Sterling nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Mr. Evans, your reputation as the shadow strategist is known throughout the capital. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, yet you are so humble. I suspect you are holding back your true counsel." A flicker of something passed through Mr. Evans's eyes, but he lowered his gaze.
"You jest, Emer."
"Sterling, I am but a common man, indebted to the late general for saving my life, and so I serve her house. Now that the house has a new master, I shall soon be retiring to my hometown. If there is anything you require of me before I depart, I am at your service." Sterling replied, "Your words put me to shame, Mr. Evans. A man of your legendary talent. The young lord is still young and needs your guidance. Surely he would not let you leave?" Evans smiled. "You flatter me, Mr. Sterling. I am just a man from the countryside. You, sir, are a high-ranking civil servant and honors graduate. To deign to serve as an estate administrator. With you here, his lordship can rest easy. Did he not entrust you with such an important task on your very first day?" The two men exchanged a look and a peaceful smile, as if it were all just a perfectly ordinary conversation. Sterling then took his leave. He returned to his new quarters in the Eastern Estate and spent some time in thought. The very next day, he summoned a professional matchmaker. He inquired discreetly about what sort of match a woman of Miss Caroline's background could expect. He had the matchmaker prepare a list of suitable candidates before presenting them to her. He had barely begun this task when he received a summons from the Chancellor's office. He was puzzled, having only been in his new post for a few days. He quickly changed into his formal attire and went to the capital. To his surprise, he was brought directly before the Chancellor. When Sterling entered, Alastair was just concluding a meeting with several senior cabinet members. Sterling stood silently by the wall, holding his breath. As the cabinet members filed out, their eyes lingered on his mid-level official's uniform. They were clearly unfamiliar with him. It was rare for an official of his rank to be granted a personal audience. A small swell of pride rose in Sterling. A man in a deep purple, high-collared uniform stepped out of the inner office. "Mr. Sterling?" he inquired with a polite smile. "The Chancellor will see you now. Only a handful of senior staff in the capital wore that color." This man, serving in the Chancellor's personal office, had to be Duncan, Alastair's most trusted chief of staff. Sterling knew that despite his deferential manner, Duncan commanded the Chancellor's security forces and was a veteran who had served alongside Alastair in the war. Sterling did not dare to be arrogant. He bowed deeply. "Thank you for your trouble, sir." Duncan sidestepped the bow. "The Chancellor is waiting, sir." "Please," he said with a smile. Sterling followed Duncan into the office. Alastair was seated behind his desk, sipping tea. He looked up as Sterling entered, his gaze as sharp and cold as ice. Sterling felt as if he were being X-rayed, and a chill went through him. He quickly bowed. Alastair set down his cup. "You may rise," he said casually. "You've settled in at the estate? How is Jules?" His expression was its usual stern mask, but his tone was mild. Sterling felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. He knew Jules was the Lord's childhood name and that Alastair had held the late general in high esteem. It was natural that he would show concern for her only son. He replied respectfully, "His lordship's fever has passed, and he has made a full recovery." Alastair nodded. "He has no elders to guide him now. He is likely to be unruly. Now that you are there, you must guide him and ensure he does not neglect his studies. When his mourning ends and he returns to the academy, I intend to test him myself." His tone was still cool and his speech slow, but Sterling felt an immense pressure in those few words. He quickly replied, "Rest assured, Chancellor. His lordship is very sensible now. Just the other day, he instructed us to send gifts to his tutors at the academy. He has also been reviewing his books in preparation for the examinations after his mourning period." A slight curve appeared on Alastair's lips. If he were confident in his studies, he wouldn't be in such a rush to send gifts. The little monkey likely realizes his vacation is ending and is trying to bribe his professors. The Chancellor's expression was usually glacial, but when he spoke of the little monkey, his tone held a hint of playful teasing. The imposing aura of the nation's leader softened for a moment. Sterling couldn't help but smile, relaxing a little more. He was surprised by how well the Chancellor knew the young lord's character. Outwardly so cold and unapproachable, he was surprisingly attentive to his young ward. Alastair continued, "As for his studies, let him be. He's been away from them for a long time. There's no need to rush. It would be worse if he strained himself." He turned to Duncan. "The last time I saw him, he was still on a restricted diet. He's too young for that. I believe the kitchens have a new shipment of sea cucumber and bird's nest soup. Duncan, have some sent to him." Duncan immediately agreed. "Yes, sir. I will personally select the best and see if there are any other nourishing items to send along to the Vance estate." Alastair turned back to Sterling. Even though it's cold, he should be getting some physical activity during the day. It will keep him from getting sick. Sterling replied, "His lordship has in fact been practicing his riding and marksmanship daily. He spends time on the shooting range every day." Alastair raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "The shooting range?" Seeing the Chancellor was in a good mood, Sterling elaborated. "Yes, sir. He has engaged a retired marksman from the military to instruct him. I believe he was once one of the general's top sharpshooters. His lordship also felt the estate was too quiet and has had the stewards purchase a number of young boys. He says he wants to train them alongside himself." Alastair thought for a moment. One of the general's marksmen. That would be Landon Yarrow. He is a loyal and sensible man. The boy is in good hands. He seemed unconcerned. So, he's feeling better and getting into mischief. Let him be. It must be quiet for him, all alone in that big house. Duncan remarked, but the sons of the governors will be arriving soon. I've seen the list. They are all around his lordship's age. They will all be at the academy together. He will have company then. Alistair seemed to remember. He tilted his head. That's right. They should be arriving any day now. Sterling understood. The Chancellor's seat had been without a formal First Lady for years, and he had no children. For the past 2 years, ministers had petitioned him to marry and produce an heir. He had ignored them until last year when he finally issued a decree summoning the children of all regional governors under the age of 16 to the capital for their education. It was well known that the Chancellor, even as a young man, had shown no interest in women. Rumors from his military days suggested a battlefield injury had made him incapable of fathering children. His refusal to marry only fueled these speculations. The decree was seen as confirmation that he could not produce his own heir. The dynastic council had been exceptionally picky about the candidates, rejecting any with the slightest hint of a poor reputation. This led to the widespread belief that the Chancellor was choosing an heir to adopt. But 16 seemed too old. A high-ranking minister had delicately raised this point, but the Chancellor had just smiled and said, I have no patience for raising children. I will choose one who is intelligent and diligent. It will save you all a great deal of trouble in the future. This had all but confirmed the minister's suspicions. While they lamented the situation, they found a silver lining. Choosing from a pool of nearly grown, proven candidates was better than being saddled with a potentially unfit heir simply due to birthright. It also eliminated the problem of a powerful First Lady's family. The only concern was that an older, adopted heir would have a strong connection to his birth family, potentially giving a regional governor undue influence. But the governors were far from the capital, and with proper guidance. The various factions in the capital were already making their calculations. Before these young men had even arrived, their biographies and family connections were being scrutinized on the desks of countless powerful figures. Sterling's mind raced, but he still couldn't fathom the Chancellor's true intentions in appointing him to the Vance estate. He had expected some special instructions today, but the audience had been nothing more than an uncle inquiring about his nephew. There was also the matter of Mr. Evans, but Sterling dared not speak out of turn. He recalled his last audience with the Chancellor at the celebratory dinner after his graduation. The Chancellor had paused while making a toast and said, "Robert Sterling, is it? Your thesis was excellent. Go and get some practical experience in the ministries. You have the makings of a fine public servant." Just a few words, but from the Chancellor they were golden. All his classmates had heard. Throughout his subsequent postings, everyone knew of the Chancellor's remark. Even those who were jealous had to treat him with a measure of respect. Then came the new directive. He was to be the administrator of the late general's estate. An estate administrator? A glorified servant. Wasn't it a demotion, an insult? Everyone was shocked. Some mocked him, others whispered behind his back, some gloated. But he had not hesitated. He accepted the post that same day. He owed the Chancellor a debt of gratitude he could never repay. As for the posting itself, he was certain the Chancellor had a deeper purpose. Alistair seemed oblivious to Sterling's thoughts. He glanced at the time and said, "You may go. Serve well." Sterling bowed deeply and left. As he was about to exit the government complex, Duncan caught up with him. "Mr. Sterling, a moment." Sterling smiled. "Mr. Duncan, is there anything else?" Duncan beamed. His Majesty is gifting you 2 bolts of golden silk brocade. I've already had the staff open the stores. It will be delivered to the estate later along with the provisions for his lordship. Please see that you receive it. Sterling was overjoyed and was about to kneel in thanks, but Duncan stopped him with a gesture. No need for formalities. This is not an official gift. It comes from His Majesty's private treasury. You should simply take it as a reward for your diligent service. Also, I must ask you to convey a message to His Lordship for me. Sterling quickly replied, "Of course, sir. Please, tell me." Duncan's smile was warm and friendly. "Please tell His Lordship that the holiday gift he sent me was most excellent. I am very grateful that he thought of me, especially during his mourning. Please thank him for me." Sterling's heart skipped a beat. Duncan was speaking openly in front of a junior aide, with no hint of secrecy. It was clear that this was not a clandestine gift. He understood immediately that the Chancellor was aware of it. He replied, "I will be sure to pass on the message, sir. You can rest assured." Duncan nodded, still smiling, and walked with Sterling almost to the main gate before turning back. On the way back to the estate, Sterling began to piece things together. The audience had been both a demonstration of the Chancellor's affection for Lord Vance. Duncan, the Chancellor's closest confidant, had openly admitted to receiving a gift from the young lord. This was also a signal, a sign of the Lord's unusual standing with the Chancellor. It all pointed to one thing: the former administrator's sudden dismissal, the fact that the estate retained its special status even after the general's death. There was a deeper meaning here. Most people assumed the Chancellor was maintaining the estate's prestige to placate the general's former troops. But now, it seemed more likely that the Chancellor simply cared for the orphan boy. The Chancellor was a man of few words, yet today he had been almost verbose, his conversation filled with mundane details. In retrospect, it was a rare display of humanity. The thought flashed through Sterling's mind, and he almost laughed at himself. The Chancellor was a once-in-a-generation leader, his mind inscrutable. His own duty was simple: to serve him loyally. And if the Chancellor's will was for him to serve the young Lord Vance loyally, then he would do so without overthinking it. He returned to the estate and immediately went to report to Julian about his audience with the Chancellor. He found the page, Simon, to announce him at the Western residence. But Simon informed him that his lordship had moved back to the Eastern estate that day. Everything was in chaos. He advised Sterling not to go to the private quarters, as his lordship was in the main hall with the men from the Valor Wing, selecting new boys. Sterling made his way to the main hall. The estate was indeed a hive of activity, with servants moving furniture and belongings. He felt a sense of satisfaction. With the Lord residing in the Eastern estate, his own work would be much more convenient. As he approached the hall, he could hear the lively sounds from within. The spacious hall was filled with a group of boys brought by an agent from an indenture agency. The veterans from the Valor Wing were all there, examining the boys and commenting loudly. One was thin but light on his feet with bright eyes, a scout's build. Another was sturdy, worth 2 men. Another looked obedient and honest. They were all skinny, but as one veteran noted, they were from famine-stricken areas. A few good meals and they would shoot up. They reminisced about their own youths, how they had only gotten their first full meal after joining the army, how the general had never shortchanged their pay. They laughed about fighting harder for the promise of a beef stew after a victory. They teased each other about being tongue-tied and clumsy in the general's presence. The hall was filled with the warm sound of their laughter and shared memories. Sterling saw the young lord slouched in a large armchair in the center of the hall, wrapped in a white fur cloak. One elbow rested on the arm of the chair as he watched the boys below, a faint smile on his lips. He was still pale from his recent illness. He resembled the late general, but his features were more refined, his skin almost translucent. At his age, he had an androgynous beauty. He was clearly lost in thought. Though he had summoned the agent, he seemed detached from the lively selection process, his mind elsewhere. He was just a child, Sterling thought. Both parents gone, all alone. His cheerful demeanor was probably just a brave front. These old soldiers, for all their loyalty, didn't know the first thing about what a boy his age enjoyed. No wonder Duncan had said it would be good for him when the other boys arrived at the academy. He needed peers. Sterling was reminded of the late General Vance. Though she was a commoner by birth, an adopted daughter of the previous chancellor, she was a brilliant and fierce warrior who had saved the current chancellor's life countless times during the Northern Wars. The bond between them was said to have been forged in the heat of battle, a true sibling relationship. Royal affairs were always hard to judge, but the chancellor's exceptional care for his friend's orphan son seemed to be genuine. He stepped forward and bowed. "My lord, I have returned." Julian finally noticed him, looking surprised. "Mr. Sterling, you're here. Please have a seat. What is it?" He waved a hand to the head butler, who understood and quickly led the agent and the remaining boys away. Sterling took a seat. "I was summoned to the capital today, my lord. I thought it was a matter for the commission, but it was the chancellor himself. He wished to inquire about your health. He was also concerned that your morning diet might be affecting your strength and has sent some sea cucumber and bird's nest soup. It should arrive shortly." The old veterans all turned their heads. Hearing the chancellor's words, they all broke into smiles. "Well now, that's a profound honor. The chancellor seems so cold, but he looks after our lord very well. He was always cold, even during the war. Not warm and kind like the general. I say our lord deserves it. The general always looked after the chancellor, too. If it weren't for our general supporting him back when he was just an heir." Julian suddenly cut in, his voice sharp. "Did the chancellor have any other instructions?" Sterling, who had been growing increasingly alarmed by the veteran's dangerously candid remarks, was relieved. He had been regretting not asking for a private audience in the study. The men were on the verge of saying something treasonous. Seeing Julian cut them off, he let out a silent breath of relief. "His Majesty said you should get more physical activity to strengthen your body. He also instructed you to review your studies. He intends to test you personally after your mourning period." Julian froze. All the veterans burst into laughter. "Our boy gets a headache just thinking about books. He's just like the general, hated studying. He's inherited a title, what does it matter if he studies or not? The chancellor is too strict. He still needs to be literate. He'll have duties to perform. He can't be an ignoramus like us his whole life. Even if it's just to write a few poems to woo his future wife." Sterling was at a loss, caught between amusement and dismay at the old soldier's lack of decorum. He looked at the young lord, but was surprised to see that the expression on his face was not that of a child dreading his studies. Instead, it was a look of faint nostalgia and sadness. The unervingly adult expression startled Sterling. "My lord?" he prompted. Julian seemed to snap out of his reverie. He smiled at Sterling. "Please come to my study, and perhaps you could draft a letter of thanks for me." He stood up, pulling his fur cloak tighter around him as if against a sudden chill. He then turned to the veterans. "Please, continue your selection. Choose anyone you think is promising. Don't worry about making a mistake. Those who aren't suited for training can work as guards or be sent to the country estates." Don't hold back." The veterans laughed and agreed. "We will, my lord. We'll pick the very best for you." A faint smile touched Julian's lips as he motioned for Sterling to follow him. In the study, after Sterling had relayed the Chancellor's words, he couldn't help but add, "His Majesty holds you in the highest regard, my lord. You must be grateful and strive to be worthy of his favor." Held him in high regard? It was more than that. This great leader, this brilliant strategist and statesman, had indulged him without limit. Julian smiled, his eyes softening. In his first life, he had done something outrageous. At the time, he knew it was probably impossible, but he had been filled with the fearless arrogance of youth. And perhaps, subconsciously, he had known all along that the Chancellor would not punish him. He had submitted a formal petition to the court for permission to marry Leo. The court had been thrown into chaos. The Ethics Committee had buried the Chancellor's desk in articles of impeachment, accusing Julian of being audacious, arrogant, immoral, and disrespectful of all tradition. Yet, faced with this shocking, scandalous request, the Chancellor had not rejected it. He had simply asked the court, "What is tradition? The husband is the head of the wife. My sister, the general, was a woman who achieved more than any man. She pacified the North and built a legacy. No one spoke of tradition then. As for continuing the family line, they are two men, but an heir can be adopted. If the matter of an heir is resolved, why must we cling to convention? They love each other and have their family's blessing. They do not live in your houses or eat your food. What business is it of yours?" The Chancellor rarely expressed his own opinion in court, preferring to let his ministers debate. But when he did, his word was law. The ministers, knowing this, fell silent. They probably thought it was better to let one powerless noble disgrace himself than to oppose the Chancellor. To everyone's astonishment, the Chancellor not only approved the union but ordered the court to legally register the marriage and even granted Leo a minor title. The capital was in an uproar, but the Chancellor was an iron-fisted ruler. He ignored the censors, and the ministers, reading the room, quickly dropped the matter. Among the common people, it was a sensational story for a few weeks, but no one rushed to follow their example, and soon it was forgotten. However, another rumor began to spread in private. It was said that the Chancellor's move was a masterful act of killing with kindness. He was a famously enlightened ruler. Why would he defy all convention for the sake of Lord Vance? It was obvious, the rumor went, that he feared the late general's influence in the military. By indulging Lord Vance in his decadent and immoral behavior, he was allowing him to disgrace himself and lose public support, making it easier to dismantle the general's network of loyalists. This was the true cunning of a great leader. These rumors had spread like wildfire, and even Julian himself had believed them at the time. After he was poisoned in his first life and reborn, he had thought long and hard about it. He had concluded that his reckless behavior had played right into the Chancellor's hands. He had been so absorbed in his personal life that he had neglected his mother's allies, and her military influence had been completely absorbed by Alistair, himself a military man. So, in his second life, he had distanced himself from Leo and thrown his support behind Kaelin. Under the guidance of Kaelin's mentor, he had begun to place his own people in the military, using his mother's legacy to build alliances. But the Chancellor had allowed him to do as he pleased, never interfering with his support for Kaelin. He had even, eventually, named Kaelin as his successor before dying on the battlefield. Soon after Kaelin's ascension, Julian had been arrested. Before his imprisonment, Kaelin had laid his cards on the table. He believed that Julian was the Chancellor's illegitimate son. Julian's faction building and amassing of military power were acts that would have been a death sentence for anyone else, yet he had remained untouched. The Chancellor's favor toward him was plain for all to see. Only Julian himself had been blind to it. It was never Alistair who had feared him. He had understood that the moment he was arrested, Caelan hadn't even needed to give the order. There would always be opportunistic ministers eager to do his dirty work. Alistair's kindness toward him had been a bottomless well of indulgence. He wanted to marry a man, Alistair had agreed. He wanted to build his own military faction, Alistair had agreed. No wonder Caelan had believed he was the Chancellor's son, born of a forbidden relationship with his own nominal sister. A son who could never be publicly acknowledged and was therefore compensated with limitless indulgence. So Caelan's initial friendship had all been a calculated move, guided by his mentor, to win Julian over and thereby gain the Chancellor's trust. A smooth path from the son of a minor governor to the heir of the nation. Thinking back, Caelan was probably on his way to the capital right now. Julian's gaze was calm, but his expression was complex. Sterling felt that there was a deep sadness and loss in the boy's eyes, and he held his tongue. But then Julian suddenly smiled. "I understand. Please have a letter of thanks drafted for me, Mr. Sterling. Say that I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the Chancellor's grace, that I can never repay him, and that I will devote my life to serving him." Sterling agreed, though he privately thought the boy's choice of words was a bit dramatic for his age. He would have to polish the language to convey a sense of youthful, sincere gratitude. Then a thought occurred to him. Mr. Evans is known for his literary skill. As I am new here, perhaps it would be more appropriate for him to draft the letter? Julian turned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Then he smiled. "You can write it, Mr. Evans. He is planning to retire. It is best you get used to these duties." Sterling looked at him, and the strange feeling returned. Given Mr. Evans's reputation, it was odd for Julian to treat him like an ordinary aide. He was about to say something more when the study door burst open. It was Aunt Caroline. She was flushed with anger. Simon trailed behind her, wringing his hands. "Mum, his lordship is in a meeting." Caroline's chest was heaving. She gave Julian a quick, sharp bow. "We are all family here, so I will not stand on ceremony. My lord, after settling your things, I discovered that no quarters have been prepared for me in the Eastern Estate. I asked the butler, and he said it was Mr. Sterling's arrangement. Mr. Sterling, what is the meaning of this? If I am not living in the main house, who will look after his lordship?" She had run the household for years, with the late ambassador's backing. She was not intimidated by officials. Her gaze on Sterling was cold and sharp, as if he had stolen something precious from her. Julian looked up. "I gave the order, Aunt Caroline." She was stunned. "My lord? I'll be 15 after the new year," Julian said. "At that age, most families would be arranging a marriage. You are an unmarried woman. It would be improper for you to compromise your reputation by staying here to look after me." Caroline stared at Julian's clear, calm eyes, and was at a loss for words. "But who will take care of you? Even if I live in a separate wing, I can still oversee things." Julian's eyes curved into a smile. "Don't worry. The commission is sending several experienced matrons and maids to attend to me. They should be arriving soon. Also, I have instructed Mr. Sterling to find a suitable match for you. We will arrange the engagement as soon as the mourning period is over. You will need to return to your family to prepare for the wedding anyway. It would be a hassle to move you twice. It's best you remain in the Western residence for now." "Marriage?" Caroline's face went white. She looked at Sterling, who bowed. "I have already identified 3 gentlemen of excellent character and appearance from respectable, well-to-do families. I was about to send their profiles for your consideration. If you find one suitable, we can make the arrangements quickly and hold the wedding after the mourning period ends. Your dowry has also been prepared. There is a 50-acre farm with a house for sale just west of the city. I have already sent someone to purchase it. It will make a very fine addition to your dowry." Simon and the other page, who had followed him in, exclaimed, "Congratulations, ma'am! A farm to the west? That land is worth a fortune. To be married from the western residence, what an honor. I hear a professional matchmaker is very expensive. I wonder who the groom will be. He must be wonderful if Mr. Sterling chose him himself." Carolyn stared at Julian's nonchalant smile, as if she were looking at a stranger. This child, whom she had watched grow up, who had always promised to take care of her and begged her not to marry. Why was he suddenly so determined to marry her off? Was someone plotting against her? Landon and his men? The new administrator? Or had the disgraced Thompson said something to slander her? It was so sudden. She had made so many enemies over the years that she didn't know who to suspect. She stood there, speechless. Julian had already turned to Sterling. "Please go and draft the letter of thanks, Mr. Sterling." He then turned back to Carolyn. "A gift will be arriving from the Chancellor's office shortly. I will need you to receive it and have it stored. After that, I will need you to conduct a full inventory of the vaults in both residences and prepare the ledgers for handover. Then you can focus on preparing for your wedding. There isn't much time. You should be thinking about your trousseau and wedding gown. If you need anything, just inform the butler. Mr. Sterling will see to it. Rest assured, Aunt, we will see you off in style." Carolyn's mind was reeling. Julian, Sterling, and the two pages were all acting as if this were the most natural thing in the world, making her feel as if she were the one being unreasonable. She stood up, dazed. "But the boy is still so young. He has no family here. If I leave, who will look after him?" Sterling smiled. "Miss Carolyn, you jest. At his lordship's age, in an ordinary family, he would be old enough to marry and run a household himself. The Chancellor is his uncle. How can you say he has no family? You may set your mind at ease. Now, if you would please come with me, we can discuss the prospective grooms." The general was only an adopted daughter, practically a commoner. To call the Chancellor his uncle was a bit of a stretch. But Carolyn knew better than to say so. Her mind was in turmoil, and she didn't know how to respond. She left the study in a daze. When she tried to see Julian later, to appeal to his conscience and remind him of his past promises, she found that a chasm had opened between the eastern and western estates. The staff in the western residence were still under her control, but the eastern estate, the general's former residence, was now guarded by household troops. She couldn't even get a message to the young lord. Mr. Sterling, however, was very diligent. He sent over the profiles of several very suitable candidates, including a junior magistrate from out of town. When she rejected them, he tirelessly found more, always with a pleasant smile on his face. But everyone in both households knew the truth. She was to be married off from the estate. She no longer had any authority. The illusion that she had been the mistress of the house shattered. It was as if everyone had woken from a dream and realized that the young lord was growing up. What was a distant, poor relative doing in his house? With the late ambassador gone, her position had always been precarious. She was once again just a guest, a distant cousin. After several more failed attempts to see Julian, Carolyn realized that her marriage was inevitable. She finally chose a respectable official from a provincial town. The engagement was quickly finalized, and as soon as the mourning period ended, a wedding carriage took her away. She never saw the young lord again, and to her dying day, she never understood how her sweet Jules could have become so heartless. Julian, who had already died twice, had no time for her. He was ruthlessly efficient, pruning away all distractions and irrelevant people like dead branches. With the household affairs settled, the mourning period ended. The young Lord Vance was expected to make his social debut. Invitations poured in, but Julian declined almost all of them, using the excuse that he was young and needed to focus on his studies. Instead, he was busy. He had the estate purchase wave after wave of young, indentured boys. He personally selected the most promising and had them begin a rigorous training regimen of marksmanship, combat, and riding. He hired a tutor to teach them literacy, starting directly with Sun Tzu's The Art of War and other military classics. He hired an art teacher not to teach them landscapes, but to teach them how to draw portraits and maps. Every week, the old veterans would take turns lecturing the boys, telling them about military discipline, stories from their campaigns, their greatest victories and their most bitter defeats, and what it felt like to take a life for the first time. His goal was clear. He needed to raise a cadre of loyal elites as quickly as possible. They would be forged in daily hardship, trained in every weapon, literate enough to understand strategy. Then he would send them to his mother's old comrades in the military to be tempered. Then they would be ready. One day, he was watching the boys play a game of soccer on the small training field when a servant announced that Leo had arrived. He raised an eyebrow and sent Simon to greet him, remaining slouched in his chair by the side of the field. Since recruiting the boys, he had them engage in constant competitive activities. Soccer, horse racing, shooting contests, wrestling. Every competition had a prize. A large leaderboard hung on the wall, and points were awarded for every victory, fueling a relentless, competitive fire in the boys, ensuring they never grew complacent. This was how he would find the best. The field was clear of snow, though a layer of white still capped the surrounding walls. The boys on the field were shouting and running, wearing only light shirts. Some had stripped to the waist in the cold, their breath misting in the air, their young bodies already showing signs of hard muscle. The energy on the field was intense. Leo walked in with Simon, laughing and telling him that his master certainly knew how to have fun. He said he was getting an itch to join in himself. He had been worried that Julian would be lonely at home and had rushed over on his first day off from the academy, only to find a lively game in progress. Simon smiled. His lordship always has some new idea. But your friendship with him is special, sir. He will be happy to see you. Leo grinned and spotted Julian in a heated pavilion. He was using a pair of tongs to pull roasted chestnuts and peanuts from a small brazier. He just gestured for Leo to sit, pushing a plate of the hot nuts toward him. Leo sat down without ceremony. "You're living the good life," he said.
I'm miserable.
"The academy is packed now. Every day, my family lectures me. Terrified I'll embarrass them in front of the important new students." He grabbed a peanut and tossed it in his mouth, hissing as it burned his tongue but chewing happily. "Delicious. So the sons of the governors have all arrived?" Julian asked. "You have no idea," Leo said. "They're all so arrogant and formal. They're constantly trying to one-up each other in class. And if the chancellor shows up, it's a whole other level of performance. They're all like perfect little angels." Julian smiled and sipped his hot tea, his eyes still on the game. Leo, who could carry a conversation by himself, continued, "You should be back at the academy next month. It used to be just you. Now, with all these governors' sons. Today, Charles, the son of the Earl of Chengyi, got into a fight. The tutors didn't even defend him. They blamed him for disrupting the class and sent him home. My family heard about it and lectured me all night about not bringing shame on our house. It's tough being a study partner. You have it a little better, but any one of these new guys could be the next heir. You're going to have to watch your temper. Who hit him? Julian asked casually. Good for them. It was Kalen, the second son of the governor of Chine. He's proud and has a short fuse. Charles is an idiot. He knocked over Kalen's inkwell and then insisted Kalen had put it there on purpose. Kalen just smashed the inkwell over his head. Kalen. Julian swirled the tea in his cup. Kalen was Alistair's chosen heir, a major rival from his past life. A smile played on Julian's lips as a cheer went up from the field. The red team had scored. The players were celebrating wildly. Leo's attention was drawn to the game. Is there a prize for this game? The red team is good. The blue team is in trouble. That short kid is dragging them down. Why is he even on the field? Of course there's a prize, Julian said nonchalantly. The winning team gets a bolt of silk each, and the captain gets a bonus. Leo laughed. You're good to them. Hey. His eyes were caught by something. He watched for a moment. Isn't that the child prodigy from the Lingwu family? Julian was taken aback. What? Leo gestured with his chin. You were in mourning, so you might have missed the big news, though you must have seen it in the papers. Prime Minister Lingwu confessed and committed suicide in prison. All 3 of his sons were executed. The rest of the family, the women and children, were sentenced to military servitude and exile. His expression grew somber. That's him, Arthur Lingwu, the family's prodigy. He was writing poetry at 7. He just passed his entrance exams last year. His father doted on him, gave him the formal name Aquila last year. It was supposed to symbolize a great eagle soaring to the heavens. What a waste. Leo clicked his tongue in regret. He was a shoo-in for a scholarship this year. A scholar at 14. He would have been the youngest in the nation's history. But then the flood scandal broke, and the Prime Minister's corruption came to light. Julian looked thoughtfully at the small boy running on the field. He was indeed frail-looking, almost delicate, and clearly couldn't keep up with the others. He would run a few steps and then stop, gasping for breath. I get it, Leo said. The Lingwu family had a lot of allies. Someone probably felt sorry for him and managed to get him placed here at the estate. Everyone knows you're the only master here now, and you're in the capital. Being a military servant at the Vance estate is a lot better than being sent to some frozen outpost. It technically fulfills the sentence without violating the law. I've seen him before, Julian murmured. I saw him once at a party at their house. Leo sighed. My father pointed him out to me as an example. He was like a little prince back then, dressed in silk, surrounded by admirers. Look at him now. Julian didn't speak. He had seen Arthur Lingwu before, among Kalen's followers. He had had the tattoo of a military servant on his forehead and had been a bitter, cynical man. But he was brilliant, a master strategist. Kalen had relied on him heavily, even calling him teacher. Julian was lost in thought, watching the boy's flushed face on the field. He was clearly out of his depth, but then a larger boy on the blue team passed the ball to him. He moved to receive it, but a player from the red team darted in, stole the ball, and with a powerful kick, sent it flying into the goal. The red team erupted in cheers. Leo burst out laughing. That's just sad. He can't even catch a ball that's passed directly to him. Why is he even playing? He'd be better off on the sidelines. He's just holding his team back and making them resent him. Indeed, all the players on the blue team, except for the big one who had passed him the ball, were glaring at Arthur. They didn't say anything, with the Lord watching, but their frustration was palpable. Just then, A whistle blew, signaling the end of the game. The red team had won. They celebrated, hugging each other, while the blue team stood in dejected silence. The head steward had them all line up before Julian to receive their prizes. Julian smiled and had a servant bring out the rewards. Fine silk, a small gold coin for each player, and a bag of orange candies. They were just boys, after all, and the candy was a big hit. The red team's captain came forward, bowed, and collected the prizes for his team. Julian's gaze fell on the captain of the blue team, the tall boy who had tried to pass the ball to Arthur. He pointed at him. "You're the blue team's captain? What's your name?" The boy stepped forward. "I'm Evan, my lord." He was young but tall and athletic. Even in the cold, sweat gleamed on his skin. He was clearly a natural athlete. Julian's expression was thoughtful. "An interesting name. Arthur Lingwu. What is he to you?" Evan's face changed. He glanced at Arthur, who was standing with his head down, his own face paling. Julian looked from one to the other. Arthur was clearly mortified, knowing he had been recognized by the Lord and his guest, a young nobleman he vaguely remembered from past parties. He stepped forward, his lips pressed into a thin line. "It has nothing to do with Evan, my lord. It was my failure. I am ready to accept my punishment." His voice was filled with shame, but he held back his tears. The head steward barked, "Insolence." His lordship was addressing Evan. "Not you." Julian waved a hand to silence him. "I was just curious." "Arthur, you can answer. Who is Evan to you?" Arthur bowed his head. "Evan is my nanny's son. We grew up together. He was my study partner. My mother couldn't bear the thought of me being alone, so she arranged for him to be sold into servitude with me, to look after me." Julian nodded slowly, then turned to Evan. "Evan, you have talent. When a noble house falls, their servants are usually allowed to buy their freedom. Since you were the son of a trusted nanny, I imagine your family could have afforded it. Yet you chose to become a military servant, a status from which you can never be freed without an act of great military valor. Do you resent this?" Evan was stunned. He knelt. "My mother was deeply indebted to the family, my lord. Our whole family would die for them. We could never let the young master suffer alone." "Truly?" Julian asked. Not a single shred of resentment. Evan pressed his forehead to the ground. "None, my lord." Leo clapped his hands. "A fine, loyal servant. Jules, I need someone like that. Why don't you give him to me?" Arthur was shocked. "Where he goes, I go," he blurted out. Leo laughed. "I need someone to play soccer and ride with me. You wouldn't be any good." Evan remained kneeling, his head bowed. Julian glanced at Leo, a distant look in his eyes. Leo leaned in and whispered, "This one is only loyal to his original master. He won't be easy for you to command. Let me be the bad guy. Give him to me, I'll train him, separate them. In a few years, his loyalty will fade. I can return him to you then if you want." He was genuinely trying to help. Julian smiled faintly and turned back to Evan. "Arthur is not skilled at soccer. By forcing him onto the field to protect him, you only make the other boys resent him more. It will make his life here even harder. Did you really not think of that?" Evan shuddered but did not speak. Leo's mouth fell open. "What?" Arthur's face flushed with anger. "He was trying to help me earn enough points. My points are too low. My sleeping bunk is terrible. I can't sleep at night." Julian smiled. "He has been your study partner since you were children," bowing and scraping to repay his mother's debt. "A slave for life. He could read and write, he was strong and capable. He could have been a free man. He could have gone to university, been a farmer, a merchant. He drew out the pause. Evan, your life had infinite possibilities. But because of your young master, you chose a life of servitude. Did you really not know that by protecting him, you were only pushing him into a more humiliating and difficult position? A pampered young master, isolated and protected, trying to survive as a slave in a great house where slaves are less than nothing. What do you think would happen to him? He would offend his masters, be cast aside, and end up as a common military servant. And a soft, unskilled boy like that, he wouldn't even need to see a battlefield. The hard labor and forced marches would kill him long before that. Sometimes he thought you shouldn't listen to what people say. You should watch what they do. But even that wasn't enough. You had to look at the consequences of their actions. Only then, by tracing the path backward, could you cut through the fog of good intentions and see the stark, ugly truth. Evan pressed his forehead to the ground, silent. The anger on Arthur's face slowly faded, replaced by confusion. How interesting, Julian thought, to peel back the layers of self-righteous loyalty and childhood affection to reveal the rotten core beneath. He watched the expression on Arthur's face and smiled. Arthur, from now on, you will serve in my study. The prodigy who wrote poetry at 7.